Welcome to Karma Chronicles. Please like the video and subscribe. Let's begin.
I should have known better. The moment I walked through the door, the familiar weight of expectation and judgment pressed down on me, thick as the smell of turkey roasting in the oven. It's Thanksgiving, but it felt more like a family inquisition. Mom was the first to greet me with her usual tight-lipped smile, the one she'd perfected for years whenever something didn't live up to her standards. "Sarah, honey," she said, her voice sweet but pointed. "How's work going? Still managing that little store of yours?" The question sounded innocent enough, but I knew better. It was the same question I'd been dodging for years. Still stuck in retail, still not the lawyer my brother is, or the business mogul my sister Rachel has turned into? I shrugged, keeping my tone light. "It's good, Mom. Busy, but good." Rachel, who was already at the table picking at her salad, glanced up with that look she always wore when she was about to make someone feel small. "Busy, really? Is that what we're calling it now? That's cute." She chuckled and I felt my cheeks burn. I mean, running a store, sure, it's good, but, some of us don't stop there. Her eyes flicked toward Brian, my older brother, who was always ready to add fuel to the fire. He leaned back in his chair, a smug grin pulling at the corner of his mouth. "Yeah, Sarah, retail manager, huh? I'd be lying if I said I didn't admire your ability to settle so comfortably." His words came out too easily, like he'd been practicing them. I took a deep breath, keeping my face neutral. I don't mind it. It pays the bills. "Well, that's the problem, isn't it?" Rachel piped up again, her voice dripping with condescension. "You're just paying bills. How are you going to move forward like that?" I felt the tension building, my throat tightening as I forced myself to smile. The truth was, I'd had enough of these comments, but I wasn't going to lose it now, not in front of everyone. So, I took a long sip of water, kept my voice steady, and changed the subject. "The mashed potatoes look great, Mom," I said, cutting in before anyone could say more. But the damage had been done. The little jab Rachel had made about settling stung worse than I was willing to admit. My career, my life choices, none of them were good enough for them. And as much as I hated to admit it, I'd spent too many Thanksgivings sitting at this table, silently carrying the weight of their disappointment, pretending it didn't matter. They didn't get it. And part of me was starting to think they never would. The conversation at the table shifted quickly, as it always did, from one judgment to the next. Brian, already halfway through his second glass of wine, was in full, "I'm a lawyer, listen to me" mode. He dropped some legal jargon just loud enough for everyone to hear, his hands gesturing with the kind of confidence that only comes from having a law degree. "I'm telling you, if Dad wants to pass the business on, he's going to need someone who understands contracts, liabilities, negotiations, someone with the right credentials." He glanced at me, and I knew what he was doing, making sure we all saw how far ahead he was. Like it wasn't obvious enough already. Mom sighed, pushing her green beans around her plate. "It's true, Brian. We're all counting on you to take things to the next level. This business needs someone with vision, someone who can really drive it forward." And just like that, the conversation moved to Dad's legacy. How Brian would be the one to step in and take the reins. How he'd be the one to manage everything, to make the decisions that would shape the future. Not for the first time, I realized how little I was actually part of their plans. Meanwhile, I just sat there, poking at my food, wishing I could fade into the background, wishing they would stop talking, as if I wasn't even there. I never got asked about my life, what I did, what mattered to me. Instead, they focused on Brian's career, Rachel's startup, everything except my job. Mom shot me a sideways glance. "So, Sarah," she started, her voice just a little too bright. "How's your store doing? Any big plans for the future?" I looked up, meeting her eyes for the first time all evening. She was trying, in her own way, to make an effort, but it felt fake, like she was humoring me. I swallowed hard. "It's good, Mom. Busy, but steady." Brian snorted. "Steady. That's one way to put it." He threw a quick look over at Rachel, who was busy picking at her salad, a half smirk on her lips. "I mean, it's not exactly the kind of business that requires strategy or, a solid plan for expansion," he added, just loud enough for the table to hear. Rachel, who'd been quiet for all of 5 minutes, perked up. "Yeah, well, I've got an actual business I'm running. I'm expanding, hitting new markets. It's a different world when you're building something from the ground up." She paused, glancing at me with that look again, the one that always felt like a challenge. But I'm sure you're doing great with the whole retail manager thing. Must feel like a real accomplishment. I was done. I bit my tongue hard, tasted blood in the back of my mouth. Part of me wanted to tell them exactly what I was doing, to scream it across the table, but I knew better. Every time I tried, it was always dismissed. So I kept my mouth shut, pretending their words didn't sting. I wasn't going to let them drag me into this petty competition. The phone buzzed in my pocket, but I ignored it, not wanting to add more tension to an already suffocating evening. Brian was still going, rambling on about his latest case, how he had this big trial coming up, how he was going to be the one to save the firm's reputation. I zoned out, focusing on the noise of silverware scraping plates, the murmur of conversations I wasn't really part of. It wasn't just about my job anymore, it was about me, about the way they never really asked, never tried to understand what I was doing, what I was actually good at. The longer I sat there, the more the frustration built. I could feel the simmering anger in my chest, but I swallowed it down. If I said something now, it would just make everything worse. They'd make more jokes, pity me some more. So I stayed quiet, a passive observer in my own family. But deep down, I was at a crossroads. I could correct them, tell them everything about what I actually did, how I ran a team, how I managed complex logistics, how I saved a company's ass every day. But I knew it wouldn't change anything. They'd still see me as the person who was settling, the one who wasn't doing enough. No, it wasn't worth it. At least not tonight. So I resolved to stay quiet, let the conversation flow around me, focus on the food that didn't taste as good as I remembered, and let their expectations wash over me like a tide I couldn't escape. The phone buzzed again, but I didn't look at it this time. I just took a bite of mashed potatoes and tried not to feel so invisible. The phone buzzed again, vibrating against my leg, sharp and insistent, slicing through the low hum of conversation at the table. I glanced at the screen, an unknown number, but something about the way it pinged felt urgent. I hesitated, then swiped it open, excusing myself with a quick glance at my family. "Sarah, it's Tim," my boss said, his voice tight with tension. "Listen, we've got a situation. One of our major clients is about to lose a $200 million shipment. There's a mess at the warehouse, and we need you to come in immediately. If we don't fix it, this could set off a chain reaction of financial losses. I need you to oversee the situation. You're the only one who can manage this right now." My heart dropped, my stomach sinking like I'd swallowed a stone. This was the kind of work I had been trying to avoid talking about all evening. High stakes, high pressure stuff that always came with a deadline. Stuff that made me feel like I was constantly in the eye of a storm, trying to keep everything together. I glanced at the table where my family's conversation continued without me. Brian was droning on about his latest legal victory, oblivious to the world around him. Rachel was scrolling through her phone, and Mom was wiping her hands on a napkin, her eyes distant. Tim, I started to respond, but the weight of it all hit me. I couldn't just sit here and ignore this. I wasn't going to let a $200 million shipment go down the drain because I was at a dinner table. This was what I did. This was the responsibility I carried, whether they saw it or not. "Sarah, I know it's Thanksgiving, but I wouldn't call you unless it was urgent. Can I count on you to come in right away?" Tim's voice was firm now, almost a command. I could hear the pressure in his words, and there was no room for hesitation. "Yeah, I'm on it." My voice was steady, even though inside I was panicking. I pressed the phone against my ear for a second longer than necessary, the hum of the background noise in the room suddenly louder, sharper. I hung up, and for a moment, everything around me felt like it was spinning. The sound of my family's laughter, the clink of silverware against plates, it all seemed to fade as I stood up, slowly, feeling the weight of their eyes on me without looking back. "Everything okay?" Mom asked, her voice slightly strained, no doubt sensing the shift in my energy. I grabbed my purse, slinging it over my shoulder. "I've got to go to work. There's an emergency." I said it like it was no big deal, but I knew what would come next. I knew they'd take it the wrong way, make it sound like I was overreacting. Rachel, her face lit up with amusement, spoke before I could even get to the door. "Work on Thanksgiving." Her tone was dripping with sarcasm. "Sounds like someone's in way over their head." I bit down on the inside of my cheek, fighting the urge to snap back at her. But I knew that wouldn't change anything. It would only make her believe even more that I was the one who wasn't doing enough. Brian glanced up from his phone just long enough to smirk, clearly pleased with himself. "You know, Sarah, I'm sure they'll get it handled without you. It's just a warehouse, right? The comment hit harder than I expected, but I didn't show it. I kept my face neutral, my voice calm. It's a little more complicated than that. I turned to Mom, who was watching me closely, concern etched in her features. Sorry, but this is important. I'll call you later. Without waiting for a response, I turned and walked toward the door. The sound of my footsteps on the hardwood floor felt like thunder in the silence. I didn't look back, couldn't look back. I knew what I'd hear: the quiet murmurs, the disappointed glances, the assumptions that would follow me out. As I stepped outside into the cold, my breath fogging in the air, I felt a sense of relief wash over me. I wasn't going to sit here and keep pretending. This was my job. This was real. And whatever they thought, I was the one who had to handle it. As soon as I stepped toward the door, the room behind me went still, like they all knew what was coming next. I could feel their eyes on my back, the weight of their stares pressing into me like 1,000 needles. It wasn't a surprise, but it still stung. Mom's voice cut through the silence, soft but insistent. Sarah, can it wait? It's Thanksgiving? Why don't you just leave it until tomorrow? She sounded like she was trying to soften the blow, but all I could hear was the unspoken implication. Your job doesn't really matter, does it? I paused with my hand on the doorknob, my back still turned to them. I wanted to say something, something sharp, but instead I forced a breath in and out, holding on to the calm I didn't feel. I can't, Mom. It's important. The words tasted heavy, like I was swallowing a stone, but I couldn't back down now. Dad spoke up then, his voice thick with skepticism. It's just a warehouse issue, Sarah. You could probably fix it from home, right? Just call someone and sort it out. No reason to run off like it's the end of the world. His words hit me like a slap, dismissive and cold. Like the work I did wasn't real work. Like I wasn't in charge of anything that mattered. I could feel the heat rising in my chest. Just a warehouse issue. They didn't get it? Not one bit. Warehouse issue. I was overseeing millions of dollars in products, running the logistics of an entire supply chain. And if things went wrong, it wasn't just a warehouse issue. It would affect an entire business, a whole network of clients, people who depended on that shipment, but none of that mattered to them. I gripped the door frame harder, trying to keep myself steady. My mouth was dry, my hands clammy, but I couldn't stay. Sarah, you're really going to leave. Rachel's voice cut through the tension, laced with that familiar edge of sarcasm. She was sitting at the table, leaning back in her chair like she was watching a drama unfold on TV. Yeah, this is totally going to help with your career, huh? I mean, nothing says success like running off to work on Thanksgiving. I'm sure your boss will be so impressed. She laughed under her breath, clearly expecting me to just let her words roll off me. I didn't answer her right away. I just took another deep breath, my pulse pounding in my ears. I didn't want to get into it, not now, not with all of them staring at me like I was making some huge mistake. The truth was, I wasn't sure they'd even care if I explained. Rachel's success had always overshadowed mine in their eyes. She was the one they looked up to, the one who had made it, and me. I was just stuck managing a store, wasn't I? I could feel the weight of their judgment pressing down harder now, almost suffocating. Brian added his 2 cents from across the room, not even looking up from his phone. You really think that's the right call, Sarah? You're leaving us here on Thanksgiving just to deal with that. He scoffed, shaking his head. You know, it sounds like you're just covering for your lack of success. Can't handle the heat, huh? I closed my eyes for a second, the lump in my throat threatening to choke me. But I didn't let it. I couldn't. Not now. Thanks for the advice, Brian, I muttered, my voice low, controlled. But I need to go. This is my job. I stepped through the door and into the cool night air, the sharp bite of it hitting my face like a slap. The door shut behind me with a soft click, but it felt like it was closing on something much heavier. I stood there for a second, breathing, trying to steady my racing heart. The house felt miles away now, even though it was only a few steps behind me. I could hear them still talking, still gossiping about me, but I didn't turn around. I couldn't. I had to go. I got into my car, my hands shaking as I slid the key into the ignition and pulled away from the curb. The tires squealed for a second, but the sound of the engine humming was like a reminder of what I had to do, what I was doing right now. I wasn't just walking out on a Thanksgiving dinner. I was walking out to handle a crisis, one that could cost millions if I didn't take control. As I drove away from the house, I could still hear their voices in my head, their judgment, their disbelief, but I didn't care anymore. The task ahead was all that mattered. This was what I had to do, whether they ever understood or not. I pulled into the parking garage with my hands still tight on the wheel, my knuckles white. The air in the car felt thick, like I was holding my breath and waiting for the storm to hit. I parked quickly, grabbed my bag, and marched into the building, ignoring the sting of the cold night air on my skin. Inside, the office was buzzing with a different kind of energy than I was used to. Urgent, frantic. Tim was standing in the lobby, phone pressed to his ear, pacing back and forth like he was trying to will the situation under control. His eyes lit up when he saw me, but it wasn't a welcoming look. It was the kind of relief you feel when someone finally shows up to put out the fire you've been trying to put out alone. "Sarah, thank God. You're here," he said, hanging up the phone. His voice was strained, tired. "Listen, the warehouse is a disaster. We're at risk of losing the entire client contract if we don't get this shipment out on time. They've got a $200 million shipment that needs to be delivered by tomorrow, and we're already behind." I felt a weight settle in my stomach. This wasn't just an issue anymore. It was a catastrophe waiting to happen. I nodded, steeling myself. "Okay, walk me through it." Tim led me into the war room, where a handful of senior managers were gathered around a table littered with paperwork, open laptops, and coffee cups that had long since gone cold. The tension in the room was thick enough to cut with a knife. Every single person in the room knew how serious this was. Everyone but me, that is, who had spent the past few hours pretending it didn't exist while my family's expectations hung over me. "All right," I said, stepping up to the whiteboard. "Let's break it down. We're missing the deadline for the shipment because of two issues: poor coordination at the warehouse and delays with the truckers. Who's handling the warehouse side?" One of the managers, a woman named Carla, spoke up. "That's me. We're backed up with inventory, and there's a bottleneck at the loading docks. We've got pallets waiting to go out, but the line's too backed up to get them out on time." I turned to her, feeling the pressure build but keeping my voice even. "What's the holdup at the docks? Is it a manpower issue or equipment failure?" "Manpower. We're short-staffed tonight," Carla replied, sounding defeated. "Okay," I said, making quick notes. "How much time do we need to get the dock clear?" She hesitated. "At least 4 hours to get everything loaded and on the trucks." I looked around the room, scanning the faces of the others in the room. 4 hours isn't going to work. We need to move faster. Tim, get on the phone with staffing. Get another team over here, now. And we need to get another set of trucks moving as soon as possible. Tim was already on the phone before I finished speaking. I turned back to Carla. "What else can we do to speed this up?" "We've got one of the loading bays open, but it's not enough," she said, her voice tense. "We'll need to push through the night." "Fine," I said, cutting her off. "Push through the night. We'll need extra shifts. I don't care if we have to throw in a couple of overtime bonuses. Just get it done." I turned to another manager, a guy named Jordan, who had been working logistics. "Jordan, I need you on the trucks. Get a clear schedule. Prioritize the clients who can be delivered on time. We're not just going to throw everything onto the first available truck. We need precision." I could feel the weight of the room shift. Everyone was looking at me now, some with the relief that I was finally giving clear instructions, others with the nerves of knowing I was holding everything in my hands. But it didn't faze me. This was my job. This was what I had been training for, even if my family didn't get it. The meeting went on for another hour with me diving into the details, making calls, directing teams, and making decisions that would either save or sink the entire operation. I pushed everyone harder, faster, and more efficiently. Every time something came up, I was right there, solving the problem. I could feel the adrenaline coursing through me as we moved from one issue to the next, making adjustments, finding solutions, and slowly but surely regaining control of a situation that had felt out of hand only hours before. By the end of the meeting, we had a solid plan in place. The trucks were rerouted, staffing was increased, and we had enough hands on deck to move the shipment out by the deadline. I could see the relief on Tim's face as the tension in the room started to ease. "Sarah, I'm impressed," Tim said, his voice softer now. He leaned against the table, looking at me like he was seeing me for the first time. "You really pulled this together. I didn't think we could salvage it. I didn't think we had a shot." I shrugged, trying to hide the weight of it all. "It's not done yet. We've still got work to do, but we've got a plan now. That's half the battle." Tim clapped me on the back. "I knew I could count on you. I'll handle the external communications. Keep our client updated. You just focus on making sure everything stays on track. I nodded, feeling a tightness in my chest loosen just a little. It wasn't over, but we had a chance now. And that was everything. As the team dispersed to put the plan into action, I stepped out of the room for a moment to collect myself. I leaned against the wall, my heart still pounding in my chest, my mind racing through all the moving parts. It wasn't just a warehouse issue. It wasn't just about moving boxes. It was about keeping a company afloat, keeping clients happy, and doing the work no one else had the stomach for. I had done it. And for the first time tonight, I felt like I was doing something that mattered. I stepped out of the building, my mind still racing through the logistics, still managing the weight of the crisis I'd just solved. The cool night air hit me as I walked to my car, and for a moment, it almost felt like I could breathe. I was heading home. I needed to grab a few things, rest, and try to shake off the heaviness of the day. But then my phone rang again. I glanced at the screen, another unknown number. My stomach tightened, instinctively knowing it wasn't good news. I answered it anyway. "Sarah," came the voice of my team leader, Alex, "we've got another situation. The negotiations with our biggest corporate client, well, they're on the brink of falling apart. We need you to meet with senior partners at the hotel down the road. It's a big deal, and they're asking for you specifically. They trust your expertise to keep this from imploding." I didn't have to think about it. Not really. I had no choice. I was already running on empty, but this was part of the job. "I'll be there in 15, I said, my voice already slipping into that calm, authoritative tone I used when everything was about to hit the fan. "Thanks, Sarah. We're counting on you," Alex said before hanging up. I rubbed my eyes, already feeling the weight of the next task pressing down. But I couldn't ignore it. I couldn't walk away, not when everything was on the line. I hit the gas and drove toward my parents' house to grab my things. When I pulled up to the block, I noticed something strange, an unusual amount of traffic near my parents' driveway. I slowed, my headlights catching on a line of black SUVs parked in front of the house. The vehicles were sleek and expensive, the kind of cars you didn't see in this neighborhood unless something important was happening. A knot of confusion tightened in my stomach. I pulled into the driveway, my car crunching over the gravel as I parked next to the convoy. The front door to my parents' house was wide open, and standing in the doorway were my mom and dad, looking like they'd just seen a ghost. Behind them stood a group of sharply dressed men and women, all wearing that kind of professional look that made it clear they weren't here for small talk. Then I saw him, the CEO of the major client I'd worked with before. This was big, the kind of client whose name made everyone sit up straighter when it was mentioned. He was tall, impeccably dressed in a tailored suit, and his face was a mask of focus. When he spotted me, his eyes narrowed for a moment, like he was making sure it was really me. I couldn't believe it. They were here, for me. I got out of my car, walking toward them with a slow, steady pace, trying to keep my face calm even though my heart was hammering in my chest. The shock of it all left me a little numb. I had no idea why they were here, but I knew it wasn't a coincidence. This was something important. They were here for a reason. Mom was the first to speak, her voice edged with panic and confusion. "Sarah, what is going on? Who are all these people?" I took a deep breath, feeling the tension rise as I stepped toward the door, acknowledging the group of executives. "I'll explain in a minute, Mom," I said softly. "But I have to go inside. These people need to talk to me." She looked at me, her expression wavering between disbelief and concern. "But this is your Thanksgiving night. What is happening?" I didn't want to leave her standing there with more questions than answers. But there wasn't time to explain everything. I had a job to do. I turned to the CEO, offering a polite nod. "Please, let's go inside." The group of executives followed me into the house, and as I stepped through the front door, I could feel my parents' eyes on me, still shocked by the sudden turn of events. I didn't stop to reassure them. I couldn't. Not now. Inside, the room felt different. There was no more dinner, no more holiday chatter. Everything had shifted. The smell of turkey and mashed potatoes felt like it was from another lifetime. I led the group into the living room where the CEO and his team took a seat around the coffee table. My parents hovered in the background, exchanging confused glances, clearly unsure of what to make of this sudden intrusion. I cleared my throat, standing in front of them. "All right," I said, keeping my voice level. "Let's get down to it. What's the situation?" The CEO didn't waste any time. "We're in the middle of a negotiation that's about to fall apart, and we need someone who knows how to keep things together. We've been following your work, Sarah, your crisis management expertise. We need you to step in and stabilize this deal before it unravels completely. I nodded, not surprised, but still aware of how huge this was. My family was watching, the tension in the air palpable. My father's eyebrows shot up. He hadn't said much, but his silent, questioning gaze said everything. Why didn't you tell us? I couldn't answer that now. There was no time. The CEO continued. We're trusting you to find a resolution. The stakes are high. This negotiation impacts more than just our company. It could affect everything from client relationships to future investments. I nodded again, more focused now than I'd been all night. Understood. Let's get to work. My parents stood by in stunned silence as I got to work, pulling my phone from my pocket, glancing at my team leader's texts for more updates. This was the kind of moment I had prepared for, the kind where everything was on the line. But for now, my parents' confusion didn't matter. This was bigger than them. It was bigger than anything they could understand, and I wasn't about to let it slip away. I stepped into the living room, the soft creak of the floorboards beneath my feet louder than usual. The room was quiet, except for the rustle of papers and the low murmur of voices. My parents stood awkwardly by the door, still trying to process what was happening, their confusion almost palpable. The executives from the client's company were already gathered around the coffee table, and the air felt charged, like they were all waiting for something. Someone. As I walked into the room, one of the executives, a man named Darren, who I'd worked with on previous projects, stood up and gave me a tight smile. He had this way of making everything seem calm and controlled, even when the stakes were high. Sarah, he said, his voice smooth, you're just the person we need. We've been following your work closely, and there's no one else we trust for this job but you. He didn't wait for me to respond, turning to the others in the room. This is the expert we've been talking about, the one who's been handling crisis management for some of our biggest accounts. If anyone can close this deal and prevent a multi-million-dollar loss, it's her. I felt a flicker of something, a mix of pride and disbelief as Darren's words sank in. The tension in the room shifted, the executives nodding along, their eyes on me now. My parents, still frozen at the edge of the room, had started to piece it together. Their eyes bounced between me and the professionals sitting around them, their expressions flickering with surprise, confusion, and, finally, understanding. Dad's jaw tightened as he processed the words, and I saw a flash of something like guilt in his eyes. He looked at me like he'd just realized that I was more than the retail manager he'd always thought I was. Brian, sitting back on the couch, wasn't as good at hiding his reaction. His face was a mixture of disbelief and an almost pained realization. He straightened up, trying to mask his shock with a poorly veiled chuckle. So wait, you are the one they've been counting on? He asked, his voice trying to sound casual but betraying his confusion. I thought you were just running a store. This is, bigger than I thought. I didn't respond immediately. I just let the silence stretch, letting my brother's words hang in the air before I turned to the CEO, who was now watching me with a mix of focus and respect. He didn't seem like the kind of guy who wasted time with pleasantries, so I got right to it. There's a corporate negotiation that's about to fall apart, I said, my voice steady despite the tension knotting up in my chest. This isn't just about contracts. It's about securing the future of the company. If we don't stabilize this, it could lead to major financial losses, and not just for my company, but for everyone involved. I looked directly at my parents as I said it, the words finally landing in their laps. This is what I do. This is my job. My father's eyes were still locked on me, wide with something that could have been disbelief, maybe even a little shame. I could feel the weight of the years of judgment sitting heavy between us. He had always expected more from me, expected me to do better, to be better. And maybe, just maybe, he was starting to see it. But there was no apology in his eyes, just questions, a million unspoken questions. The CEO, clearly sensing the shift in the room, turned back to me and spoke, his tone calm but direct. Sarah, you're the key here. We've trusted your expertise with these kinds of situations before, and we need you to lead the final push in this negotiation. It's critical. We need to stabilize the deal, get everyone on the same page, or this whole thing could fall apart. We can't afford that. I nodded, pushing past the lump in my throat. This was my moment to own it, to show them all what I had built, not just a job, not just some retail manager position, but a role that had real impact, real responsibility. It felt good to finally say it out loud, even though I knew it wouldn't fix everything in this room. Turning to my family, I gave a quick, sharp explanation of the stakes. I know this sounds big, and it is. It's bigger than any of us. But this is the work I've been doing for the last few years. The reason I've been running around, staying late, always working on weekends. This isn't just about putting out fires in a store. This is about the future of major companies, about managing crises that could make or break them. Mom looked at me, her expression softening just a bit. She had always been the one who believed in me, even when the others didn't quite get it. She stepped forward, her voice quieter now. I had no idea, Sarah. I didn't understand what you were doing all this time. I didn't know what to say to that. I'm not sure I understood it myself, I thought, but I just nodded. It's not the easiest job to explain, but it's what I'm good at. And right now, I need to focus on this. Dad, who had been quiet up until now, let out a long breath. I could see him wrestling with something inside him. Maybe regret, maybe pride. But he didn't say anything. He just nodded slowly, like he was finally starting to see me in a different light. Brian, on the other hand, still looked a little rattled. He glanced at the executives, at me, and back to the floor. Well, he muttered, still trying to maintain some semblance of control. I guess that explains why you've always been so busy. He didn't look up. The words were almost an afterthought, but they cut deeper than I wanted to admit. I let it go. There was no point in trying to fix it right now. As I turned back to the CEO and the team, my focus sharpened. Let's get started. We don't have much time. The room fell into action, but the tension remained in the air. I could feel the weight of it, the eyes of my family on me, finally seeing who I really was, finally understanding. But there was no time to dwell on that now. There was work to do. The room was alive with tension, the air thick with the weight of expectations, and the hum of phones, papers being shuffled, and quiet murmurs. I had barely taken my seat at the table before the first round of negotiations began. The CEO's people had their game faces on, sharp suits, sharp words, sharp everything. But I was used to this. The stakes were high, and I wasn't going to let them crash and burn. We need this deal sealed, Sarah, the CEO said, his eyes fixed on me like I was the only one who mattered right now. Our client wants more flexibility on the terms. They want assurances, or they'll pull out. I could feel the pressure building, the weight of the room on my shoulders, but I didn't back down. We can give them the flexibility they need, I said, my voice steady, but we need more security on our side. The terms need to reflect the risk we're taking on. I won't budge on that. I turned to the others, looking at each face, reading the room. They were all on edge, the kind of edge where every word was a potential deal breaker. I knew they were expecting me to pull off something miraculous, and the truth was, I wasn't sure if I could, but I wasn't going to show them that. I took a deep breath and kept my voice level. We're offering a 10% price reduction, but in return, we need a longer-term commitment. We can't let them walk away with a better deal and leave us hanging. Not now. The other side shifted, exchanging glances. I could see the hesitation, the doubts, but they also knew that they were running out of time. I wasn't going to give them everything they wanted, but I was going to make them see it from our side. Let's go for a tiered discount structure, I said, making the decision on the spot. The more they commit, the better the rate. But we need to secure that long-term partnership. That's the only way this makes sense for us. The murmurs around the table quieted as they absorbed what I said. I could feel the tension in the air shift. People were listening. They were starting to trust me. I didn't take my eyes off the CEO. We'll make this work, but it's going to take compromise, and I'm not going to sell us short just to make a quick deal. The CEO sat back, his fingers steepled, weighing my words. Then, with a slow nod, he turned to his team. Fine, he said, his voice crisp. Let's make it happen, but we're not happy about the terms. I'll take that, I said, not backing down. We're giving them value in the long run. You'll see. This deal is going to work. The meeting dragged on for another hour, but the energy shifted. I kept my cool, negotiating terms, pushing for the right clauses, always keeping our company's interests in mind. I could feel the weight of each decision, but I wasn't afraid to make them. And slowly, the deal started to come together. Every step, every call, every counteroffer, it was all falling into place. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, the last terms were agreed upon. I stood up, holding my breath for a moment, and then, with a sense of finality, I shook hands with the CEO. It's done, I said, and the room seemed to exhale with me. The deal was closed. As soon as the handshakes were over and the final documents were signed, my phone buzzed in my pocket. I pulled it out, half expecting it to be something else I had to deal with. but when I saw the message from Tim, my heart skipped a beat. The shipment's cleared. We fixed the warehouse issue. Everything's back on track. I exhaled sharply, a sense of relief flooding through me. My mind, still buzzing from the meeting, finally felt like it could slow down. The shipment crisis was resolved. The deal was closed. We had saved everything. Sarah, Tim's voice came through the speaker, his tone a little warmer than usual. Great job. You really pulled us through tonight. I've got to say, I'm impressed. You turned a nightmare into a win. I leaned back in my chair, my eyes closing for a moment as the adrenaline started to ebb away. Thanks, I said, my voice softer now, the rush fading into a quiet satisfaction. I couldn't have done it without the team. We all pulled together. When I hung up, I glanced around the room. The executives were still talking, still finalizing details, but I couldn't help but feel a small sense of triumph. I had done it. I had led the negotiation, turned the tide, and made it happen. As I left the meeting room, I felt a rush of empowerment wash over me. The weight I'd been carrying for so long, trying to prove myself, trying to show that I was capable, had finally been lifted. I wasn't just the person who managed a store. I wasn't just the underachiever in my family's eyes. I was someone who had just saved a deal worth millions, and that was something no one could take away. As I walked out into the cool night air, I felt like I was finally walking with my head held high. The job wasn't done, not by a long shot. But tonight, I had won, and for the first time in a long time, that felt like enough. The phone rang the next morning, just as I was finishing my coffee. I looked at the screen, unsure of what to expect. It was my dad. I hesitated for a second before answering. Sarah, he said, his voice quieter than usual, almost hesitant. I just wanted to call and say I'm sorry. Last night, I didn't realize what you were really doing. I've always been proud of you, but I guess I didn't understand the full picture. I'm sorry for doubting you. I felt a tight knot in my chest loosen, but it didn't quite go away. It's okay, Dad, I said, keeping my voice calm. I know you didn't mean it the way it came out, but I've had to carry this weight for a long time. It's hard when the people closest to you don't see what you're doing. He paused for a moment like he was chewing on his words. I don't know what I was thinking, he admitted. I've always assumed you weren't doing enough because you weren't on the same path as Brian or Rachel. I never took the time to understand what you were actually accomplishing. I get it, I said, swallowing the sudden lump in my throat. But it wasn't just about what I was doing. It was about how you treated me based on your assumptions. I didn't expect you to always understand, but I did expect respect. And that wasn't there. I'm sorry, Sarah, he said again, his voice heavier now. I should have been more supportive. I don't want to make excuses, but I've been blind to it. I see it now. There was a long pause before I spoke again. I'm not mad, Dad. I just want you to understand. What I do isn't any more important than anyone else's job. I'm not saving lives or building empires, but I'm making a difference. And that's enough for me. I know, he said quietly. Sometimes I forget to see the whole picture. Before I could respond, the line clicked and Brian's voice came through. Hey, Sarah, it's Brian. Look, I'm, sorry too. I didn't really get what you were doing. I thought you were just, managing a store. But last night, I get it now. I was wrong. I could hear the hesitation in his voice, like he wasn't quite sure how to approach this. I wasn't sure either. It's okay, Brian, I said, forcing the words out. You never really saw it, but I'm not some underachiever just because my job looks different from yours. I never should have treated you like that, he said, the words coming more easily now. You've been doing more than I gave you credit for. I guess I assumed that if you weren't doing what I was doing, it didn't count. I nodded even though he couldn't see me. It's not about what looks important. It's about what matters to me. And what I've been doing has mattered. To the companies I work with, to the people I lead, and to me. Yeah, I get that now, he said, the apology clear in his voice. I'm sorry, I was an idiot. I laughed, but it wasn't as bitter as it could have been. We're good, Brian. Just remember it next time. When the call ended, I sat there in the quiet of my kitchen, staring at the phone in my hand. A small part of me felt vindicated, but mostly I just felt tired. This wasn't about them finally seeing my worth. It was about the years of doubt, the subtle jabs, the way they had always treated me like I was falling short, like I didn't fit into their version of success. I appreciated their apologies, but it wasn't going to fix everything. It couldn't. I knew that even if they now understood the scope of what I did, they might never fully appreciate it. They'd never get how it felt to be the one always on the outside, constantly proving myself in ways they couldn't see. But that was okay. I didn't need their approval to keep doing what I was doing. I had learned a long time ago that the only person I needed to impress was myself. And today, for the first time in a long time, I was proud of what I had done. Even if no one else understood it fully, I had saved the day. That was enough.